Welcome to the world of the future. Flying cars, learning machines, and other marvelous high-tech creations that seem like magic. These were the predictions of the 19th and 20th centuries, and you can see just how imaginative and hopeful people were about what lay ahead. Some of those visions have come true. Automated cleaning machines, video meetings, industrial agriculture, technologies meant to make life better. They were dreaming of a utopia, and what we got is humans have always been obsessed with the future, predicting it in whatever way they can. Often, the imagined future is far better than the present, but given the state of the world today, the future seems to be slipping away. As the world burns and changes, we are left grieving our lost futures, visions of a better world that fade little by little with every bad decision we make. Of course, the predictions of the past were often wildly unrealistic, but some futures were far more grounded, well within our capabilities. And yet, that future feels farther away than ever. It's sad to think that a better world, one we could realistically build, still hasn't arrived, held back by the very systems we live in. One of those systems began during the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was once called the most important moment in human history, right after the domestication of animals and plants. But it was also when capitalism was born, a system that now stretches its grip across much of the world, so deeply ingrained that many can't imagine life without it. I know it's a bit hypocritical for me to say I don't like capitalism because, like anyone, I want money, and I'll work hard to get it. But is it really money I want? I think what I truly want is freedom. The freedom to go wherever I want, whenever I want. I get that there are limits to what we can do, given the world we live in. So, I work within those limits. But honestly, I want a lot of freedom. I think there's a better system out there. One without borders, without nations, without wars. A world that doesn't divide us. But the truth is, humans are built with instincts that serve us only in our immediate surroundings, not on a global scale. We're not wired for pure rationality. And a lot of what we see today is a product of that primitive design and our basic desires. Desires for land, ownership, greed, and more. At our core, we're still savages, forever running wild in the human race. I think, in a way, capitalism stole from us the very future we could have had. It stopped the world from becoming something better, something freer, more human. Capitalism steals the joy of a job well done. The things you create are not for you, they're for them. Your work doesn't serve your own goals, it serves theirs. You're basically just a cog in the machine. They make huge profits while you only get a small fraction of what your labor is actually worth. Most of your time and energy goes into making rich people even richer. The same people who would press charges if you stole a loaf of bread, but think nothing of stealing your overtime pay or expecting you to be available 24/7. Workers don't really get to live. It's a system that defines people's worth by how much wealth they have and how much they can produce for others. Human interactions turn transactional, and the growing gap in wealth pulls relationships apart, killing friendships, ripping families, and leaving us all poorer in the end. There's no humanity in sight. It's true that capitalism gives us a kind of freedom, like choosing what kind of bread we want or which brand to go for. But that kind of freedom comes at the cost of others. The world is finite, and so is freedom. It's foolish to think we can do anything and everything without consequences. That kind of thinking leads straight to environmental destruction and pollution. Capitalism doesn't help either, because it's built on the idea of infinite growth and profit. But in a world with limits, that's a surefire way to burn everything down. Nothing is shared anymore. Everything's been privatized. The communal gets stripped away and turned into profit for the rich. Why should a giant piece of land be owned by a few people? And why do we have to pay just to exist on it? Even the intellectual capital of humanity, our inventions, discoveries, ideas, is locked behind patents and owned by capitalists instead of being returned to the commons. None of it would even exist without the work of past generations. But now, it's treated like private property. This so-called progress in technology won't benefit the common people, since only the rich can afford it. It's designed for the ruling class. Things like precision missiles, smart bombs, death drones, and life-extending medical procedures. Meanwhile, we, the everyday people, are still stuck using fossil fuels just to keep the lights on. A lot of the things we use today were developed using public funds, but then got privatized. The COVID vaccines, for example, were paid for with taxpayers' money, but now they're owned by companies like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson. Even the internet we're using right now was created with public funding, only to be privatized later. I have a dream of owning a lot of personal freedom. Having grazed shoulders with the agony of capitalism, that dream feels more urgent than ever. I used to work at a bookstore as a retail assistant, and it was one of the worst periods of my life. I worked 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. most days of the week. I spent most of my waking hours thinking about work, before sleeping, after waking up, even on my off days. The environment wasn't particularly great, so I never truly felt at ease. I didn't have time to do what I loved, not even to visit my grandparents. I couldn't read books or watch video game content as much as I wanted. I suffered through it for 4 months before I finally quit. Now, 4 years later, I'm starting a new job as a corporate worker. So far, things are going pretty well, at least at the time of writing. But I'm not exactly passionate about it, and sometimes I ask myself if I'll grow to hate it in the future. If I do, I wonder what'll happen to me if I get stuck doing this for the rest of my life. Capitalism relies on economic disparity to survive. Without wage labor to exploit, the whole system would collapse under its own weight. The machine runs on our blood, sweat, and tears, stealing the future we could have had. A future where we didn't have to work like this. Instead, we're left with a world where everyone has to keep working, keep producing some kind of made-up value just to survive. A world where money isn't just useful, it's everything. The greed that dwells so deeply in the heart of capitalism is insatiable. It devours our world from the inside out and leaves behind waste that makes it a little less livable each day. The result is a polluted, warming planet. 2024 was the hottest year on record, surpassing the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit set by the 2015 Paris Agreement. And this comes as no surprise. We've been seeing the signs for years. California, for example, has been facing a drought crisis for a long time. The 2011 to 2017 drought was the worst in the state's history, lasting nearly a decade. It killed 102 million trees and burned over 21,000 square kilometers of land through wildfires. California's almost constant dry conditions also fueled one of the worst fires in its history this year, destroying homes, businesses, and forests. Extreme weather patterns over the past 2 years created hot, dry, and windy conditions, the perfect recipe for fire. It's undeniable that climate change is a major driver behind these disasters. And it's not just California. Last year, Japan's Mount Fuji didn't receive snow until November, breaking a 150-year record dating back to 1894. In Moscow, a city known for its brutally cold winters, snowfall was below average, and January temperatures hovered around 0 degrees Celsius, the second warmest winter on record, just behind 2020. This January might have been the coldest in a decade for parts of the US, but overall, the winter was still warmer than average, 1.2 degrees Celsius above normal, ranking in the warmest third in NOAA history. For years, I have yearned to live in Japan. I want to enjoy the beauty of the seasons, the colors of the autumn leaves, the pure whites of snow, the bright colors of spring. But as the world burns and gets warmer, my chances of enjoying the seasons have gotten slimmer and slimmer. Last winter, I spent almost every day anxiously looking at the temperature in many countries and comparing it to the previous years. In Japan, the winter was so mild that they almost cancelled the winter festival in Sapporo. The thought that winter in some places will get milder and probably go away altogether made me feel sad, anxious, and depressed about our future. I feel powerless in the fight for climate change against the biggest corporations in the world. We're not nearly as fast as we need to be, and it seems like world leaders are turning a blind eye to the problem of climate change. I might not be the only one who feels this way. The National Wildlife Federation estimated that in 2012, 200 million Americans would experience serious psychological distress from climate-related events, feelings comparable to grief or even the emotional impact of death. Some people, like me, have to accept the consequences of climate change. We have to confront the fact that what we once hoped for will never come to be. We grieve for what we've lost, the animals, the forest, the places consumed by fire. We grieve for memories with our families tied to a past that will never return. And just like the past, I now have to say goodbye to my goals, dreams, plans, and fantasies, remnants of a lost future. The tragedy lies in the fact that these futures could have been ours, yet they slipped away, lost to our own actions. When we look back through history, we see countless moments where a brighter path could have been forged. With the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, capitalism began to take root, growing ever stronger, eventually shaping the world we see today. Yet, had it leaned towards a more collective, worker-owned, and eco-conscious model, the world we live in now might have been something far more beautiful, more sustainable. Some argue that without religions like Christianity or Islam, the world might have been a much more peaceful place, especially considering how many wars were justified by faith. Tensions have even arisen within the same religion, as seen in the 30 Years' War, where Protestants and Catholics fought, or the First Fitna, sparked by the death of Muhammad. Now, imagine the impact of conflicts between different religions. The Crusades serve as a prime example of wars fought between religions, where the Latin Church in the medieval period sought to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. Similarly, history is full of moments where a single event, decision, or shift could have altered the course of the world. If Archduke Franz Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated, we could have avoided World War I, the Russian Revolution, World War II, and even the Cold War. If the Library of Alexandria hadn't been destroyed, we might have advanced science, medicine, and philosophy 1,000 years earlier. We might have had electricity by 800 AD. If the US had adopted universal healthcare after World War II, millions could have enjoyed better health and been spared the burden of medical bankruptcy. And if Hitler had just been accepted into art school, World War II might never have happened. These pivot points in history could have radically improved the world as we know it, but they also had the potential to make things far worse. For example, if the Axis powers had won World War II, the world would have been ruled by fascist regimes, marked by mass suffering and authoritarian control. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 could have escalated into a full-scale nuclear war between the US and the USSR, potentially destroying much of human civilization. And if the Apollo 11 mission had failed to land on the moon, it might have demoralized the world and significantly stalled progress in space exploration. So, while we may long for a better world, we must also be grateful that it didn't become something far worse, because the thin line between progress and catastrophe is one we've walked many times before. The world can feel increasingly chaotic these days, especially in places like the US, but it's important to recognize the progress we've made too. It can be a powerful antidote to despair. Take Europe for example. In 2023 alone, it cut emissions by 8%, the biggest drop in decades outside the COVID era. Compared to 1990, emissions are now down 37%, all while the economy grew by 70%. At this pace, Europe is on track to cut emissions by 55% below 1990 levels by 2030. The UK has also made impressive progress in cutting emissions, reducing more than half since 1990. Coal, which once powered 40% of the country's electricity in 2012, dropped to zero in October 2024, marking the end of its 150-year legacy. The UK now aims to cut more than 80% of its emissions by 2035. As for China, more than half of the cars sold in the country are now electric, making 2024 the best year for global EV sales. In wind and solar, China also broke its own record, reaching its 2030 clean energy target 6 years ahead of schedule. More progress is happening around the world. Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay have added new clean electricity to their grids, and Brazil has brought deforestation down to its lowest level since 2015. In the US, Trump may have gutted Biden's climate efforts, but during his previous term, actions shifted to the state level. Many climate policies from before the Trump or even Bush era remain in place today, including the two cap-and-trade systems and a range of state renewable energy mandates. In fact, 25 states and the District of Columbia now have renewable or clean energy requirements, including many led by Republicans. So, let's not lose hope and double our efforts to forge our new future. The paths we've lost are gone forever, vanished into history's mist. But there's still so many ways to enjoy life and make the most of it. You don't have to stay in that big city. You can return to your hometown. You can change your job. You can live with your parents and share slow mornings and quiet evenings. You can visit your grandparents if they're still here, listen, laugh, and give them joy. You can find your people, build your circle, and create a space where something beautiful and lasting can grow. The world is still full of open doors. You just have to try to handle. Along the way, you'll make decisions that might hurt you. But with careful life planning and informed choices, the joy of life is within your grasp, only waiting for you to reach it. Remember, you can almost always change and improve. So, let's not allow the future and the potential we have today to be lost too. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons for supporting me. It truly means a lot. If you're looking for extra content, you can find it on my Patreon. I'll be uploading something new this month. I'm currently working a full-time job, and while things are going well, it does mean I won't have as much time to post as often. Still, it's given me time to reflect on life and what I really want from it. Some goals might need to shift to align with the future I'm building, but I'm doing my best with what I have. What about you? Have you had to let go of certain dreams because of how unpredictable the world has become? What kind of reality are you learning to accept? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, and I hope you have a peaceful, meaningful week. Bye for now.